Hello, welcome. I'm Mary Halpin Carter, head of Derryfield School, and this is Lainey Shaughnessy, our school nurse. And we're going to just wait a few minutes to let everybody gather into our virtual office space, giant audience space.
Still on the show.
Great, so let's get started. First, I want to welcome you all. Love to have parents and members of the community with us. Tonight, we are talking about our we're really giving a COVID update for November and December with a little view to the future as well. And I'm so glad to have Lainey, who is a Derryfield alumna as well as our school nurse, so phenomenal, and who had incredibly intense experiences as an ER nurse in Seattle before she came to Derryfield. So she has a lot of experience with the topic that we're talking about today. The big picture of this is that we are keeping our layers of protection in place for November and December. And the good news is that we've had only one student positive with the virus and only 4 faculty and staff since school started. And most importantly, no spread on campus. So we're so happy about that, and we want to sort of stay the course for a while. In the next 2 months, we're going to be looking at, 2 months, but 3 forces. And those 3 forces that are going to be in play during that time are first, the fact that children are going to be vaccine eligible. So that means that our 6th graders, our youngest, by winter break, are going to have had enough time, 5 to 6 weeks, to have 2 vaccinations and then have the 2-week period for them to really take hold and be effective. So we sort of see that as the first force that we're looking at, which is a force of risk reduction. The second force we're going to be looking at is another happy one, I should say, the decline in New Hampshire cases. And we're looking to watch that continue as the number of people who've had COVID-19 or have been vaccinated in the state of New Hampshire increases. And we have had some really good numbers in the 7-day averages and the 14-day averages. So that's certainly a force of risk reduction as well. And then the third force we're going to be looking at is how chilly weather driving people indoors on the weekends to socialize, whether or not that has an impact on numbers in New Hampshire. And so that's really a force of increase. So we're looking at those 2 forces of decrease and 1 a force potentially of increase to see what things look like in January when we return to school. So I want to take a moment to ask you, to invite you to please put your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So please do that. And if you have questions for Hefty, we can also take those as well. So Lainey, I'm going to turn it over to you for a minute.
Yes, so looking forward to January and after winter break, as Mary alluded to, our 6th graders who are 11 and were previously too young to get the vaccine are now vaccine eligible as of a few days ago. We are grateful for the parents that have updated us as their children have turned 12 and have gotten vaccinated. But what we are hoping to do is 6th grade families can expect to get an email from me just to ask your intention now that all students are considered vaccine eligible. Again, no questions asked. We respect your decisions because it's a big decision to make for your student and your family. But we just want to know, just so that we have it on our end, as to whether or not you intend to vaccinate your student or not. And then when we do come back in January, we are hoping to integrate our 6th graders into more of our community activities.
Excellent. So we are going to continue to look at what we're interested in is not the raw number, but the number of new cases per 100,000 citizens in New Hampshire. And if you chart them through the fall, they have actually been dropping. And our fusion cell consultant he just texted me today, yet again, the 7-day average is about 35 cases per 100,000 people, which represents a significant drop. And so that's how we watch it, and that's the number that we're thinking about. So we recognize that in the pandemic, things change so rapidly over periods of time. And so as we look over to January, I just want to give you a little glimpse of both kind of what we might do if the numbers go up, and then what we would do in the happy case that the numbers go down from where they've been this fall. So if the numbers of new cases per 100,000 rise higher than they've been this fall, then we would add a couple layers of protection and sort of in order. We would first add a partial or a full testing program as we had last year, maybe a different style, but same idea. That helps us to exclude people who might have the virus and not know it. And then the second thing we might do if cases were to rise is to limit our global trips where our kids might go out to other regions of the country where there might be virus vulnerable populations. That might be a second step. And then our third step, which would be the sort of last in the sequence, if numbers go up, would be to go to full masking, rather, except when eating. Then if numbers in the happy case drop, which is also very likely because as Mike from Fusion Cell explains it, they're watching sort of a number of all the states to see as the number of people who get vaccinated and the number of people who've already had COVID together rise, then cases drop. So it's a logical sort of, I don't know if you'd call it herd immunity, but there aren't enough hosts for the virus at that point, or there are fewer. So if numbers were to drop, the first layer that we would peel back would be the Magnus checks, which I know would make parents very delighted because there is nothing so joyful as a grumpy child waking up and getting their temperature taken first thing in the morning. The second layer that we would peel back if things looked better, were moving to masks optional indoors. So currently masks are only optional if you're in a seated controlled setting with an adult and the adult approves of masks being optional. So that would be obviously really good numbers, would move us to masks optional indoors. And then finally, if net masks went even lower, the number of new cases per 100,000 went even lower, we'd be looking at masks optional for guests. So moving on to from the big picture to the concrete, more detailed kind of information, what are the adaptations to activities in November and December that we might look forward to? So one is in the area of the robotics team, our fabulous robotics team. Good news, they can share materials really easily this year. There's not the same sort of fear that we were going to pass the virus through fomites, which is terrific. Those kids will be wearing masks if they're within 3 feet of each other, working on a robot together. And they are good news, they have the opportunity and maybe having a scrimmage in the athletic and wellness center. So there's a big space with tons of air and great HVAC. And they might be having a scrimmage of 100 to 150 people. And Lainey will be working with the coaches on details to make that a safe experience. In the realm of athletics, we look at hockey. That's our highest risk sport based on the evidence in the state last year and across the country last year. Our hockey team I believe it's our only team that is a co-op, meaning that we've joined forces with Hollis Brookline High School because in order to have enough people to have a viable hockey team. And so in that case, our AD, Chris Hetler, will work with the AD at Hollis Brookline. Lainey will work with the nurse at Hollis Brookline, and together they'll monitor the numbers of cases at both schools. And we are considering a weekly testing program for hockey players, for just hockey players. And we will give more information if that's the direction we go. That will go straight to the hockey players and their parents themselves. Basketball is a moderate risk sport. And so when not actively playing, athletes will be masked, coaches will be masked. And when playing, masks will be optional unless the team includes vaccine ineligible 6th graders until January, when they will join the crowd of everybody else at Derryfield. And then finally, swimming is even lower risk from the evidence of the studies that came out last year. And so athletes will be masked when they're not in the water, but not surprisingly, masks are not quite as efficient in water as one might hope. So no masks in the water. Alpine and Nordic those kids will be masked and distanced if they're in lodges. But the good news is this year, they'll be unmasked on chairlifts. They'll be sitting on chairlifts normally this year and anytime that they're outdoors. And then finally, yoga and strength and conditioning, which happened in the Athletic and Wellness Center. Again, a new facility with brand new fabulous HVAC and lots of airy ceilings. Those rooms have also have HEPA HEPA units, air purifying in each of those spaces. And so if students are 6 feet apart, then masks are optional in that case there. So you can see this trend that we're working to keep people safe, but also not have masks get in the way inadvertently of whatever kids are trying to do when we can think it's pretty safe. Moving on to the arts, Lainey and I are both going to the play pretty soon tonight. And the play, kids in theater and kids in chorus, they practice with masks on unless they're really far apart and they're practicing, and they're performing mask optional. Spacing is going to be optimized and auditorium doors open for nice fresh air. Band is going to feature wind instruments on the periphery of the ensemble, and spacing again optimized and auditorium doors open. And then if you are in the audience, like we'll be tonight, you can expect right now that masks will be on for everyone. Students, faculty, and staff who are vaccine eligible may sit next to each other as we do in community meeting, right next to each other. However, we'll leave one space between family groups tonight. And that's something that as numbers go down, we'll be looking at that to change. And then we move to the category of events and parties, which is so fabulous that we're even saying the words events and parties after last year. And first, events, a lot of our events will be held that involve adults will be held after hours to limit interactions between parents and visitors and students. And our events will be held in our bigger spaces that have significant volumes of air. So you can expect big rooms with lots of fresh air and maybe cold temperatures. So good to bring a sweater. At stand-up receptions, eating spaces are going to be somewhat separated from the masked on socializing spaces. Sit-down dinners are going to feature spacing. So with that in mind, I've sort of run through all the details of kind of the early winter and how that looks. Lainey, do you have any general words of advice for people?
Yes. So I'm coming up on my year anniversary. But what I want to be for the Derryfield community is a resource, and I want to be able to partner with you guys. And the best way that we can do that is just start by having conversations. And so if you feel like your student has symptoms, or they might have symptoms of COVID-19, we're in this wonderful thing called cold and flu season. Mixed with a little bit of COVID. And what's unfortunate about all three of those things happening at the same time is they all have the same symptoms. And COVID is really sneaky because you can have someone that got it from one singular person and they have completely different symptoms. So it's hard. So the only way that we can differentiate between the two or three, cold, flu, and COVID, are through testing, but not every symptom requires a test. So if we're able to start having those conversations and figure out what exactly is going on, is it a migraine? Is it a stress headache? Is it allergies? Because those are also a thing. We can start having those conversations so that we are on the same page and we have that universal understanding. But the only way that we can get to that point is if we start having those conversations. So I'm a resource for you all. You can get in touch with me via email or phone. So that's kind of one part of it. The other thing is that you can't go wrong by getting testing. And the other wonderful thing is that the state is providing some pop-up locations in terms of testing sites that are free. There is one very close to campus near Gill Stadium in Manchester. It is walk-up appointments during school hours, 9 to 3, 7 days a week. No appointment needed, no insurance needed, no questions asked. You swab yourself, which I found out today. And the best thing is that there's a really quick turnaround time, and it's PCR quality, so you know that it's good. And so when in doubt, get tested. When in doubt, give me a call, and we can start having those conversations and figuring out what those next steps might be.
Wonderful. So I think another thing that's been really relevant is looking at how Derryfield has done in terms of cluster outbreaks in other schools. And I wonder, Lainey, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, so Derryfield continues to be very fortunate in the fact that we've made it. One of the sixth graders the other day was like, we've been in school for 2 months. But we've gone 2 months and we've only had 5 total cases, which has not been the case at many schools. So we continue to be very fortunate. Where we were this time last year in terms of a cluster outbreak or an outbreak, it typically involves at least 3 people that are connected through contact tracing. Right now in this school year, there's an average about 9.9, so almost 10 students associated with one cluster outbreak. Last year in the 2020-2021 school year, granted a lot of that was
For the whole state of New Hampshire.
for the whole
right?
state of New Hampshire, grades 6 through 12, there were 110 total cluster outbreaks. This year so far, as of late October, there have been 141 cluster outbreaks in just a couple of months. So you can imagine we're already surpassing where we were all last year. There's a potential that it's only going to continue to increase.
And Lenny, just to double check, you said
Yes.
6 through 12, because that's what we always say here.
Sorry, not 6
But you
through
meant
12.
K through
K
12.
through 12, all of the schools, K through 12. And there's been over 1,000 individuals associated in those cases with clusters. So Derryfield has continued to be very lucky with the fact that we've only had 5 cases, and thus far this year, knocking on all of the wood, we've had no community transmission, although if that happens.
So no cluster outbreaks.
No cluster
here.
outbreaks, but we're here if things do happen.
Right,
We are
we're
being
ready.
prepared.
Yes. So I think, Derryfield is also back to all the activities and programs of 2019. And so that's really what we're feeling confident about, is that our protocols have worked. And so that, is really a sign that we're going to keep going as we go into November and December with the variables that we discussed earlier. So a question came in the Q&A about protocols for vaccinated students who are returning to school if they're traveling internationally over break.
Mhm.
And I believe we'll be following the state guidelines.
Yes, so right now we are completely in alignment with the state. And the state is more or less aligned with the government CDC guidelines. And so for vaccinated students, you can always check those sources. They may change, they may not change, but as of right now, for any international travel, if you are vaccinated coming back, you might need to get a COVID test for re-entering the state or the states and state. But there's no additional quarantine time like there was last year, or additional tests needed for school if you are vaccinated. And that's in alignment with those state guidelines.
So, a question came in about how we do our numbers. And I think what's relevant for the way the state reports its numbers, we know sometimes the state struggles with consistency and they report a whole bunch of cases at the same time and day to day. And so we don't look at an individual day and what the individual day is. We look at 7-day averages and 14-day averages. And then we're not looking at the raw numbers, we're looking at the number of cases per 100,000. So, and we are doing that in line with our consultant who's looking at the New Hampshire state numbers, but also at Johns Hopkins, also at the New York Times, sort of looking at a number, and he has other sources as well. So that's where we are with our numbers. And obviously it's been working pretty well so far. Any other questions? We have our fabulous helper, Amy Branch, who is.
Will there ever be a
Amy.
time when only vaccinated people are unmasked?
No, I was going to say I could answer that. We respect the decisions that people make for their families. It is a big decision, that being a medical decision. We have also been able to look in terms of our community as a whole. Once we get those numbers from our 6th graders, they can then be factored in, but even including the 6th graders not being vaccinated at all, like they were in the beginning of the school year, we still had really high vaccination rates, which would kind of help to protect and buffer our whole community.
That's right. It's all about sort of what's the percentage chance, what's the risk factor. And so we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for, and in fact, you can't you can't guarantee perfection even with vaccinations. So we're looking for risk reduction and living as normal a life as we can possibly provide for our kids. And clearly, and again, we knock on the wood if my arm is
So
long
much
enough.
wood.
We have been so fortunate this year with no outbreaks, one student having the virus, no spread on campus. And so we believe that we're on the right track, and we are grateful for everybody for hanging with us and having confidence, because we've really been able, I think, to give kids a wonderful fall. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and be well and stay healthy, and most importantly, have fun and learn. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.